the residency program today, and I'll be talking to you in a little bit. But to begin our session, I'm going to be introducing Dr. Canison, who's our chair, and then we're going to go through the various people in leadership and just try to provide you our perspective on our program and just kind of give you a little bit more information. And then at the end, we're going to have about 30 or 40 minutes to do a Q&A session and try to answer as many questions as we can. So Dr. Canison, I'll let him start.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Buckley. Thank you very much. So good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the country. My name is Maxime Canison. I'm the chair of the department here of anesthesiology and perioperative medicine at UCLA. So welcome to UCLA. It's a pleasure to have you all here. We have a pretty high attendance today for our open house. I just want to say a few words about the department, and as Dr. Buckley mentioned, you get the chance to meet with pretty much the leadership. And when I say leadership, I also include the chief residents who are part of the leadership in the department. But a few words about the department. The way I like to think about the department is that when you join us and train with us, at the end of your training, what we want to make sure is that you're going to be able to have the career that you want to have. And I'm trying to choose my words very carefully, because I'm not talking about you finding a job after residency. I'm talking about you finding the career you want to have for the rest of your life, basically. Whether you want to be an outstanding clinician, whether you want to be a leader in clinical care, leader in departments, if you want to be in private practice, community, in academia, whether you want to be a researcher, whether you want to be an educator, whether you want to go to industry, training here at UCLA with us, you'll find pathways to achieve the goals you want to achieve. Our department has also a very strong focus on community engagement. We also want to train the leaders of the future who are going to give back to the community. And as UCLA, we are committed to this mission. And as a department, especially, we are committed to this mission. So we want to make sure that we are going to be able to identify those of you who are committed to this community engagement. With that, you're going to have the ability to meet with all the leadership here. I'm very proud of the team we have in education, whether it's for the residency program, but also the leadership of the department, and hopefully you'll be able to see everything we have to offer. In terms of the research, I also want to give you a very brief overview of what we are doing, and focus especially on something that we are very excited to have probably in the next year or two, that we'll be able to hopefully offer a T32 to our fellows and residents and junior faculty in the year to come. It's not completely sure yet, but we are very close to be able to offer this to our faculty in probably the year coming or the following year. So with that, again, welcome to UCLA. Make sure that you ask all the questions you want to ask, and remember that during your application process, you're going to be interviewing programs as much as programs are going to interview you. So try to make sure that you turn the table. You're here to evaluate us as much as we are here to evaluate the candidates. So don't be shy, ask questions. I know many of you will feel very comfortable asking questions to residents, to the chief residents, but make sure that you also ask questions to the leadership. I like to think that we have a very approachable leadership, and please take advantage of this, leverage it, and ask all the questions you have so that you make sure that you understand how the department is working. Again, thank you very much for attending. Thank you for your interest in our program. It's a privilege to have you here, and then I wish you a very good rest of the evening or afternoon based on where you are. With this, I'm going to introduce our Vice Chair for Education, Dr. Judy Turner.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. At least here in Los Angeles, it's afternoon. It's a pretty warm, sunny day outside, so not anything too new. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is, I think, the third time we're doing this open house, and I feel like it gets a little bit better every year. So we're excited to have you joining us. I do want to let you know that you should have received an email with the slides. And if you have not, you will be getting that. And we are recording this, so this will be also put up on a YouTube channel that you can access later on as well. So with that, I will get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is our educational mission. And I want to just direct you to what is a revision to our mission statement. If you look online on our education website, we haven't even posted this yet. This is kind of hot off the presses. But essentially what we've done is we got a group of people together representing all the major areas of our department to really just take a fresh look at our mission statement and try to figure out, you know, is the mission statement really expressing all the things that we want to strive towards? So what we have, I believe, finally settled on, we'll get it posted here very shortly, is that we want to foster exceptional anesthesiologists who are going to excel in all aspects of perioperative medicine, including providing compassionate, culturally competent clinical care, committing to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and addressing healthcare disparities in all of our communities, engaging in team-oriented supportive leadership, and performing impactful scholarly inquiry. So these are all the domains in which we think educational effort is really important to be targeted. And I'm really hoping that by the time we finish our presentations today and the time you get to spend meeting our residents in the breakout rooms, that you'll really be able to see a demonstration of our commitment to these efforts. So if you're on this call, you must have some interest in our program, but you may not know that we're a top 10 program in the United States anesthesia residency training programs, according to the US News and World Reports. This is exciting news for us, and you're welcome to go find out a little bit more information about that. But I thought it was important to, for you to recognize that, that we are one of the best training programs in the country. And part of the reason I'm actually putting this up here is not just to brag about us, but I am very proud of everything that everyone's doing here. But I think that one of the things that makes us unique is that not only are we a recognized program for training great anesthesiologists who are going to go out in the world and do amazing things, but we're able to really, you know, put value on your education in a way that also supports your well-being without sacrificing your clinical training. And I do think that we are really uniquely poised to be able to provide that kind of an educational experience. And hopefully you'll see that as you go through the rest of this day. I just want to show you a few pictures of people in our education leadership team. And this was actually a picture from our first in-person with guests graduation that we had this last June. And we're really excited about the fact that we were able to not only meet in person for graduation, but have guests, which was really fun. And so you see all the people, many of the people you're going to see on this call today, and probably many of the people you've been exchanging emails with on the staff side, but also our awesome chief residents, some of whom you're going to get a chance to meet today. So we really do consider this to be a team effort, and everybody who's involved in resident education is incredibly dedicated to this whole process. So here's our residency program directors team, headed up, of course, by Dr. Jack Buckley, who you just met. Dr. Christine Mayabui is his associate program director, so she kind of helps him run everything. And when he's not here, she's the person in charge. Dr. Soban Umar, who you're going to meet in a few minutes, is our associate program director for resident research. He himself is a proliferative clinician scientist and an amazing mentor. And I'm going to actually give you guys QR code here in just a minute that you can use to access at least the basic profile for all of our faculty and resident contact information as well. Jason Lee, who you'll meet in just a moment also, is our Associate Program Director for Didactics and Curriculum Development. Jason is one of our educators trained with a medical education fellowship. He's very involved in the School of Medicine. We're excited to have him helping us. Lauren Beck is our Associate Program Director for Quality and Safety, and she helps us with making sure that everybody is adequately trained in quality and safety. And then last but not least, we have Dr. Satya Patel, who is the Associate Program Director for our Anesthesia Internship. As you know, we're a 4-year categorical program, and we do have an internal medicine-based internship, and Satya Patel is the person who helps us run that at our local Veterans Administration Hospital, which is about a mile away. I don't see Dr. Patel on the call. We were hoping to give him a chance to say hi, but we just got a text from him that he's in a rapid response, so he's doing something more important. But you will get a chance to talk to him later if you're interested. These are the QR codes I was mentioning. So you can just use this information to access our faculty profiles, find out where people did med school, et cetera. And the same for our residents. You can, I don't think there's as much information for the residents, but certainly residents' names and their email addresses for the contacts as well. And then obviously our department website as well. So this is our residency education office team. We're really fortunate because we have such an amazing group of people and a pretty large group of people. We've finally been able to fill the spots that we've been hoping to for the last couple of years. Lucy Mendez is our coordinator and has been here at UCLA for I think 25 years, and in our department for close to 20 years. You know, she's somebody who knows really everything there is to know about our program and is incredibly devoted. Jessica Delgado is our medical student education coordinator. So some of you who maybe have done sub-Is with us have met with her. She's also very involved in various aspects of the residency program. Arelia Gonzalez is probably somebody you've exchanged some emails with, as she's been really important in helping us organize these kinds of activities. And she's the associate program director, or excuse me, program coordinator. Karen Larrañaga is has an interesting new position, really helping to coordinate all of our didactic efforts across both the residency and the fellowship. And that's a new position that she is helping us with, and also special projects. And then Delana Lee is a new addition to our team since I think last May or June, helping us with scheduling resident activities and things like requests. And believe it or not, we have a whole person helping us with that kind of activity. So we're pretty fortunate about that. And then just to let you know, we also have a separate fellowship team. Karen has feet in both camps, so she's on both of these slides, but Lucine Terosian and Susan Kim help coordinate our fellowships. We have many, many fellowships, and you can find out about those on our website. So if you're interested in pursuing fellowship, that's an opportunity for you coming here from UCLA. And then the last thing I just want to just show you is how we work together as leadership and why we're so committed, or how we're so committed. So something that we've done 2 of these events this month, and we have another one, which is the 3rd one that we're going to do in a couple of weeks. And basically what this is an event that we used to hold annually, but because of COVID, we're not able to do it for about 3 years. And what it is a dinner that we have at a faculty's home where we invite an entire class and their significant others to come meet with us and talk about an important problem in anesthesia, which is substance use disorder. And so it serves 2 purposes. Number one, it's just a great opportunity for us to get to know each other outside of work. It's a chance for us to get to know your significant others. And it's also an important opportunity for us to talk about an important illness that can impact anesthesiologists at a higher rate. And so we were really happy that we were able to bring this back, and you can see these pictures were just from a couple in the last week or 2. And this is the kind of devotion that you're going to get from the faculty here. You're going to get people who, Dr. Sofer, who's in the top left here. I'll show you, circle his name here. That's Dr. Sofer. He's been doing this for 25 years, and he started it, and I did it when I was a resident back in like the early 2000s. And it's just, this is what I meant when I showed you that picture about US News and World Report's top 10. Yes, that's true. And we're going to train you to be, among the best anesthesiologists in the world, but we're going to do it in a place where you're going to feel supported and valued, and you're going to be part of our UCLA family. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Buckley.
Hello again. So my goal in my next 3 slides is just to kind of give you a little bit of information that I think is pertinent to helping you know a little bit more about our program. So we have 27 residents per class. We have fellowships in pretty much every specialty you can think of. One of the questions I like to address about the fellows is you want to always find out, how are the fellows used when you go to a program? Are you competing with the fellows for cases? So some programs, for example, one resident will do a cardiac room, and then a fellow will do the other cardiac room. And then the fellow typically will do the more difficult, challenging cardiac case. In our program, there's almost no competition for cases because the fellows and the residents are both assigned to the same room. And if you think about it, when a resident's doing a cardiac rotation, they're really interested in doing the intubation, doing the arterial line, doing the central line, doing the swan, and those types of things. The fellow's not doing a fellowship to learn those skills. The fellow's doing the fellowship to do the big picture, how to be a cardiac anesthesiologist. Same thing applies to our thoracic fellows, our liver transplant fellows. Pretty much all of our fellows are learning the big picture. So the residents will do all the procedures, and then the fellow kind of acts like a mini attending. So you're really never competing with the fellows for any of the cases. And the residents, I think, really like having the fellows in the room because it's just another person to talk to and learn, about that specialty. The only exception to that rule is our PEDS fellows, because if you think about it, the PEDS fellows actually want to do the intubation on the NICU baby. So in that case, it's actually better to separate the residents. And we have so much PEDS volume in this hospital that we have faculty doing babies on their own simply because we've run out of fellows and residents. So even though they share the cases, there's really no competition. We have 140 clinical faculty. So those are the attendings that work with the residents. We have 10 people, what we call attending anesthesiologists. Those are board certified anesthesiologists that choose to just work on their own and not work with residents. We have 53 CRNAs. I do want to talk a little bit about the CRNAs that I think is important for your training. Our CRNAs are assigned in a way that it's really meant to benefit the residents' training. So the CRNAs spend a lot of time in our surgery centers, in our GI suites, in our eye institutes. And during the daytime, meaning 7 to 3 p.m., very few CRNAs actually work in our main operating room, which is where we do most of our big clinical cases. So the residents are in the big cases in the main operating room, and the CRNAs are at the other sites. But at 3 p.m., those CRNAs come over from those other sites and then are available to start relieving residents. So I think in my mind, it's a really good system where there's no competition with the CRNAs, but then the CRNAs become available to kind of help relieve you in the afternoons. Because most of them work 10 or 12-hour shifts. So most of them get work until 5:30 or 7:30 at night. And then a lot of times those cases just end naturally so that the CRNAs don't have to be relieved. So their main role is really to help get the residents out in a reasonable hour. We even have a CRNA that works a 1 to 9:30 shift, 9:30 at night, with kind of the same idea, just helping get the residents out in a reasonable time. And I think it's important to note, we do not have a student SRNA school. So there's no competition for cases with SRNAs, which I think is also very important. The few SRNAs that occasionally come here are exclusively where our CRNAs are assigned. And as I mentioned before, that's mostly the surgery centers, the GI centers, those types of places. So in total, about 50% of our cases are done by residents, and then the other 50% are done by others. And I think this is a happy mix because by having only about half the cases done by residents, it really lets us assign the most educational cases to the residents, and then everyone else fills in the gaps. And that's how we do our assignments. The residents are assigned first, and then everyone else fills in whatever's left. We have 9 NIH-funded lab groups, so that puts us in the top 6 in the country for funding for research every year. So really what this slide's about is trying to help you understand how do we do recruitment and how do we select applicants, because I think that's really a pertinent question that all of you want to ask. And the questions that I was reading as I was preparing for this talk is people want to know, how do we screen the applicants? What do we use the step scores for? Those types of things. And we're a little bit unusual in how we do everything. I chair an ASA committee for program directors, so I meet with a lot of program directors, and I'm also involved in the ABA for some of our exams that we write. So I spend a lot of time with program directors from different countries or different programs. And most programs that I talk to, they use computerized programs for screening applicants to decide who gets an interview. It's fairly quick, but I don't think it's the best way of doing it. And to the best of my knowledge of all those program directors I've met with, we're the only one that use, we don't use any computers in that sense. We have about 20 faculty that review the files. So you've spent many years working hard to get to today. I want a faculty member to actually open your file and read your entire file to decide, do you deserve an interview? So those 20 faculty will actually read your files in full, and then they'll provide myself and Dr. Mayabui a recommendation whether we should offer you an interview. So once they review your file, myself and Dr. Mayabui will review their review, and then a lot of times we'll actually open your file again and then do a more in-depth review. And I think this is important because it allows us to really look at your total file and not just look at what is your step score or what is, some mathematical number that a computer can figure out. And I think this really works well because it allows us to get a very diverse group of residents with a wide background of experiences that are from pretty much every region of the country. And when people ask me, what do I look for in an applicant? What I say is I look for just previous signs of success. So that could be your excellent work in medical school. That could be some amazing research work. That could be just interesting work experience or just life experiences. And I kind of try to look at you as a whole person, not just a simple file. And I also like to look at what are your challenges that you experienced along the way, and what did you learn from those challenges, and how did that kind of shape you as a person? So I think this kind of makes you as a whole applicant as opposed to any one little thing. Talking about the interview process, we will do, for each applicant, we'll have 4 interviewers. So it'll be 3 faculty and 1 chief resident. And on an interview day, we only interview 7 applicants, which you'll find is actually an exceptionally small number. Most programs, I think, do somewhere between 12 and 20. But the reason we interview 7 applicants in a day is it gives us a chance to really get to know you as a person. And when we interview you, there's no trick questions, there's no complicated questions. We're really just going to learn about you, like how you got to your path to today, being interested in anesthesia, and just give you opportunities to talk about your successes. And you'll see when the faculty interview you, they'll actually have read your entire file and they'll really know you well as a person. And then the day before the interview, you'll meet with some of our residents, and those days will be just residents. So it'll give you an opportunity to ask, all your questions to kind of prepare for the interview. And our goal, as I mentioned, is I want to match just a diverse group of residents with wide-ranging experiences, because I think that makes for a stronger residency, but I think it actually helps your training, because if you train with all these other residents that have done the exact same thing as you have, it's helpful, but I think it's actually better when you have a wide variety of experiences. The last slide before we move on to Dr. Mayabui is I just want to show you a little bit of our benefits, because I think this is actually pretty impressive list when you look at it. The salary starts out at $76,000 and it moves up to $86,000 by the time you'd be a PGY 5 if you did a fellowship with us. In addition to that, you get $12,000 per year as a housing stipend. And then we have a meal allowance for about $3,000 that you use in our main hospital systems, Ronald Reagan and Santa Monica. When you're away from those 2 sites, if those hospitals do not provide food, you're allowed to use up to $25 per day with Uber Eats to get meals. There's a relocation stipend of $27.50. We have very generous health, dental, vision insurance for both yourself and family members. There's 4 weeks of vacation every year, and then during your CA1 to CA3 year, you can get 5 days of meeting time to attend conferences. Another thing that we have that I think is fairly unique is if you're on some type of shift, it doesn't have to be an overnight call shift, but any shift that is fatiguing and you feel like driving home would be potentially dangerous and you'd be, we don't want you falling asleep at the wheel, you can actually call an Uber. The Uber will take you home, and then the next day you can take an Uber back to the hospital and get your car for the next shift. So I think it's a really unique benefit we have, and it's been used by many of our residents, and I really enjoy it because after you worked hard on a call night, the last thing I want you to do is driving home and being tired as you drive. And then we also provide your medical license, your UCLA Step 3 fees, and then your DEA license is covered. So in general, I think it's a pretty significant amount of benefits. So now I'd like to introduce Dr. Mayabui, who's going to tell you a little bit more about our program.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I would like to give everyone a super warm welcome. Our goal of the residency leadership is to give you exposure to cutting-edge clinical training. This is the first floor atrium of our main Ronald Reagan Medical Center. We are a quaternary center. Patients come from many parts of California and out of state to be seen by our physicians and surgeons. Congratulations to each of you on the call for being in the final years of medical school. This marks the transition to residency, where it's more hands-on patient care, almost like an apprenticeship under the guidance of mentors. At Ronald Reagan Medical Center, each floor from the 3rd floor to the 8th floor has at least 1 ICU. Here, as a healthcare system, we take care of transplant patients, congenital heart patients, high-risk OB cases, to highly advanced interventional radiology and cath lab cases. It is my honor to be able to highlight the successful placements of our graduates at different fellowship programs across the country. We also feel very proud to have our graduates recruited to competitive private practices, and academic institutions. This is our education steering committee that meets every month. Important to point out on the top row, third from the right, is Dr. Michael Sofer, our Vice Chair of Anesthesia Clinical Services, and Dr. Joe Hong, our Executive Vice Chair. To our far right is Dr. Vanderwell, who was our previous chair and guided us through the pandemic. On the bottom row, you will see our resident elected chief residents from the PGY4 class and our class representatives from the PGY1 to PGY3 classes. We meet monthly to listen to the issues presented to us by our residents. Over the last 4 years, we've had to be creative to implement different wellness events. We do feel strongly that these ideas are inspired by resident and resident-led. They have arranged monthly events like social hour for last Fridays of the month, Saturday beach days, snacks in the library, and our annual resident retreat. Tapping into programs available for UCLA employees like the Behavioral Wellness Center has been a huge resource for our own residents. Despite all the sunshine and fun events, our residents do a great job of meeting our milestones during training. We're proud to share that this year's graduates, class of 2022, all passed the written advanced board examination in July after these 4 clinical years. Now, Dr. Subhan Umar will highlight our resident research.
Thank you very much. I would like to highlight some of the research. I'm Subhan Umar. I'm the Associate Program Director for Resident Research. Of note, I was trained at UCLA for my research training and clinical training, and currently I'm a PI of a R01 funded lab in the Center for Health Sciences. So here, what we are looking at are the ASA and the Western Anesthesia Resident Conference WARC presentations from our residents and trainees. And you can see that there's a great number of presentations in 2022 in ASA as well as WARC, and our residents have always done very well, and that's highlighted here. In WARC 2022, both the first and the third place oral presentation awards were won by our residents, John Park and Justine Liang, as well as the ASA 2022 resident research essay contest. John Park stood second for his paper that's mentioned here. So these are some of our resident highlights. So Brittany Burton was a CA3 resident. She's an exceptional physician scientist. She's on our scholars program that we'll talk about in a little bit, as well as John Park, who is on resident research pathway, and they have published heavily in high impact journals. And these are some of the examples of the clinician scientists that we have in training. So we have 2 dedicated pathways to train clinician scientists in residency. So one of them is Anesthesiology Residency Research Pathway. And basically this is a 4-year program where residents will get significant amount of research time during the training. So here they're guaranteed research time so they can get their project off the ground, as well as have mentorship and start to excel in their training. And eventually they are ready to take on grants as well as a career as a physician scientist. Then the dedicated scholars program, which is a 5-year program. So that's an additional 1-year competitive 60-month program intended to train the future clinician scientists. And it will be supported by our forthcoming NIH T32 grant that Dr. Kennison talked about. We are very excited about that possibility. Then our recruitment for this program usually begins at the residency interview day. We don't have a separate track on ERAS, so just to note. So you can apply through the regular ERAS residency spot, but then please make sure that you highlight in your application or on the interview day that you're interested in the scholars program. So we'll identify the applicants early on, and they will be encouraged to apply. Research experience and future career plans must be identified in a letter of intent. and letters of recommendation from research faculty will be required. So typically 1 to 2 applicants per year will be accepted to this program, and $10,000 stipend per year will be provided starting in CA1 year through the remainder of the program. And ARSP candidates will be mentored and expected to apply for grant funding and to present at scientific evening, WARC, and other national and regional society meetings. And this is just to highlight some of the publications. I don't expect you to read everything. If you're looking at a recorded presentation, you can pause it and look at it. But we are exceptionally proud of all these papers that have come out in the last couple of years, and these are resident-led or resident-run projects. And with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, which is Dr. Jason Lee.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out and spending your Friday evening with us. Before I do begin to talk about our wonderful resident education, I did want to briefly introduce Dr. Satya Patel, who now is available and is on the Zoom.
Hi, thank you.
Sorry, there's something going on with Reagan. But Dr. Patel and I are both part of the E4E program as well in the med school, so I'm excited to introduce him, and it looks like he's now spotlighted on the Zoom. So I'll continue after him.
Hi, everyone. So excited that you're all here. Thanks for taking the time. And thank you, Dr. Buckley and team, for inviting me as well. I think what's really special about this training program is that it really is, the intern year really is linked to the CA1, CA2, and CA3 years. And so really a continuum of your residency training, whereas you may have a transitional year somewhere else in, other programs. And so I was just at a rapid response for AFib with RVR, and there were 2 fantastic anesthesiology interns in there handling business. So they're getting their sort of acute care experience at the same time. One of the main tenets of the core principles of the intern year is to really get a grasp of internal medicine, because you all will become physiologists. My colleagues across the street in the OR are excellent physiologists, and I think that a foundation in medicine really helps. And so we do a lot of classical internal medicine things here at the VA. So there's morning report, noon conference, a lot of discussion about clinical reasoning with regards to diagnostic reasoning and management reasoning, which comes up all the times in acute situations. And you have such a breadth of experience here through telemetry, ICU. You do a lot of surgical rotations as well. So you get a fantastic exposure to sort of everything. So that's all I kind of wanted to say. Thanks for listening.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Patel. So I'm going to continue with discussing what we're doing with the resident education. And I just wanted to highlight quickly on the pictures that I selected here. Education is done beyond just the classroom. We have various sessions in the Sim Center. We even have sessions done on the rooftops of some of our attendings out in Santa Monica. So we like to change the scenery and have you learn in different environments. Just as a brief overview, we have weekly didactics on Tuesdays for about an hour and a half, and this is protected time where we ensure that all of our residents are relieved to attend these lectures. Not only if you're at UCLA, but also at the offsite locations, we have it so that you can zoom into these important didactic series. We have different monthly themes with various reading assignments that are specific for their different classes. We also have theme-specific simulation sessions that are spread throughout for all the different classes. We also have several research sessions as well as a scientific evening towards the end of the year where all the residents get to present their scholarly activities to the department. We hold professionalism workshops. We have a risk management session. We also have a series of lectures from visiting professors who come from all over the country and the world to give grand rounds. We also invite them to give lectures to our residents. And we also have a whole host of different longitudinal series that are throughout the year that are either class specific or for the entire residency program as a whole. As I mentioned before, one good thing that came out of the pandemic is that we've found a nice hybrid of doing our didactic series where it's in person if you're at Westwood, but we also have a correlated Zoom for the residents who are off-site or maybe post call or who want to join in from elsewhere. So I mentioned before that we have monthly themes, and this is mainly for the CA1s and CA2s. And as you can see, a lot of the different concepts that we cover for the CA1s are more of the basic concepts that are a little bit more textbook based and help prepare our earlier trainees to be more comfortable in the ORs, as well as to help prepare them for their basic boards. Our CA2 is a little bit more specific for their advanced rotations that they'll do throughout that year. So cardiac, thoracic, endocrine, peds, OB. And I mentioned that we also have a longitudinal series. So we've developed a bunch of them that are spread throughout the year. We do journal club, that's class specific. We do about 4 sessions per class, and that's headed by Dr. Umar, who talked before me. We've also been working over the past year and a half closely with our EDI committee to develop a more kind of structured justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion series. And we've settled on doing 4 sessions throughout the year. These are some of the concepts that we're going to cover, and we hope to expand that in the future to possibly 6 sessions as we further develop that curriculum. We also have a series of quality improvement headed by Dr. Beck, who's one of our APDs as well. And that's mainly geared more towards the CA1s as well as the CA3s to get them prepared to understand the concepts of quality improvement and to be able to apply that later on and get prepared for their OSCEs afterwards. We also have a series of POCUS workshops that is very popular with the residents, headed by our intensivists. And we have protected time where the residents get to use ultrasound machines with standardized patients to do various exam maneuvers. We do a series of practice management for our graduating residents to help prepare them to leave off to the workforce and to understand the business aspect, the leadership and the administrative aspect of anesthesia, as well as the hospital overall. We also do an oral board and OSCE review series with our ABA board examiners, and we have several in our department who are actual board examiners, and they're the ones who lead these sessions. In addition to that, we host 2 mock orals that are given to our senior residents, graduates, and fellows, and it's a way to kind of simulate the oral exam to help prepare our graduates for success when they do their applied exam. And then finally, with this slide, I just wanted to highlight that, the resident education, the curriculum is a team effort, and I can't do this all by myself. So I created this committee a couple of years back where I recruit different resident representatives from all the classes, and we meet on a monthly basis to help work on curriculum redesign. It's really a small group session where I can get feedback from you all of what's working and what's not working, and also a way where we can brainstorm additional ways to improve didactics, to push the boundaries to make it more exciting. Some things that we've experimented with success is innovating board review series, flipping the classroom where residents are co-leading discussions, having subspecialty knowledge cards for residents on those rotations, and having a resident run M&M that's protected and just for the residents with no attendings involved. And I welcome all of you to join this committee in the future. Now I want to hand it off to Dr. Robert Whittington, who is our Vice Chair of Faculty Development, as well as one of the deans of the medical school.
Thank you, Jason. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Robert Whittington. I'm currently Vice Chair for Faculty Development and Career Advancement in the department, and also Senior Associate Dean for Faculty Development, Mentoring and Recognition at the David Geffen School. And I am a newcomer to UCLA. I joined UCLA in July of 2022. And it's a pleasure being here, and it's a pleasure to talk to you about residency here. Now, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I'm going to talk about faculty development. And there's important goals that we have for our faculty here because they're going to be your mentors. They're going to be your sponsors. So it's important that they themselves get additional training. So our goals here are to facilitate mentorship and sponsorship. We also are going to be providing additional faculty promotion guidance. Also, we want to continue to grow the external anesthesia presence of our faculty members, be it in national societies such as the American Society of Anesthesiology, the AUA, the IRS, the ABA, which is the board
of the American Board of Anesthesiology, and also to facilitate participation at the ACGME and also in research. We also want to increase leadership training for faculty, and we're going to be working on programs for that. Also to provide support for the departmental, teaching missions. And also we'll provide support for the Jedi initiatives through faculty development itself. Now, why is this important at this stage? Well, you know, faculty development can't begin too early, in other words. In fact, 2 days ago, I worked with a CA1 resident, and we exchanged information from Harvard Business Review in terms of why leadership training is important for physicians. It was an amazing experience. But anyway, it's important in terms of benefits for you because formal faculty development and career advancement programs lead to better engagement in terms of the faculty, and this promotes an optimal patient care and a teaching environment. It also leads to continued growth of UCLA anesthesia, both nationally and internationally, and it helps maintain the highest academic anesthesiology standards. And it's important to remember that some of our trainees here at UCLA will remain as faculty. They will remain with us. And this faculty development program better prepares the trainees for this transition. You know, in a few years, you will be going from trainees to attendings, and again, faculty development is crucial. And it also is important for career networking and sponsorship, especially when you look to move forward with your careers as attendings. So it's short and sweet, my presentation, but I just want to let you know that we have a huge emphasis on faculty development here. It's a pleasure being here, and really, if you have any follow-up questions, the contact information will be there. And next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jennifer Lucero. She's Associate Professor of Anesthesia and Obstetrics and Gynecology, Vice Chair of Jedi in the Department of Anesthesia, and also Associate Dean of Admissions for the David Geffen School of Medicine.
Thank you, Dr. Whittington. I think it's really important that it's never too early to think about faculty development, even as you're sitting in this seat right now thinking about, I'm just applying to residency. So it's a pleasure to be here. We had a wonderful day today doing interviews for our medical students, and I'm sure on the other side of it, you're thinking, wow, I feel like that was just yesterday that I applied to medical school. So it goes by fast. So I want to just share with you a couple items that we do here at the Department of Anesthesia and broadly within David Geffen School of Medicine. So one of the goals that we have our Vice Dean of Jedi, which is Dr. Dave McIntosh, and we have put together with the Jedi, and we have Dr. Briggs Melanson from the HEDI, which is Health Equity, Diversity, Inclusion on the health system side, this partnership between the School of Medicine, DGSOM, and the health system. We put together a Jedi and HEDI group that is working on establishing several goals across the School of Medicine and across the health system. And you as learners will be a part of this in the work that you do in patient care and the work that you do in your training. And we also have, and we'll talk about in a moment, who's part of our Jedi committee. But the important part is each of the departments are asked to have a Jedi committee and a Jedi lead. And so those committees meet within each department, and then the leadership meets with the group together, all of the Jedi leadership with Dr. McIntosh, the Vice Dean of Jedi. So some of the things we want to go over here is the mission of the David Geffen School of Medicine. And so I put this here because I think it's important for us to understand what our mission is for the medical school, what our mission is for the health system, and what our mission is looking at. We are a University of California school. We have an obligation to our communities, and Los Angeles, as you may know, is a very diverse community, and it's important for us to understand the different communities and think about how important it is for us to have diverse patient care. And so you have the mission right there. I'm just going to switch to the next slide here. Oh, thanks. Okay, so the Anesthesia Jedi. I guess I'm trying to do remote control, but apparently it's not working. So I'll give up and you can just go to the next slide. Thanks. So here's our committee. We've broken up the committee has members of it that are faculty, staff, and our learners and our nurse anesthetist group. So it's everybody that is involved in the Department of Anesthesia. The committee is split up into 5 working groups, and we have the list of the working groups. Recruitment is the one working group, and you can see the members there of the working group and what our goals for the recruitment group. And we'll go to the next slide. We have the retention working group, and this retention working group is focused on retention of our faculty, of our staff. We continue to work in creating a climate of inclusion, and our working group members are listed there. And part of that retention working group, I mentioned the culture and climate. And so there's work that we're doing in microaggressions, assessing it and reducing the micro and macroaggressions in the workplace. And we have some studies with some members of the group and our committee that are working in this area. Okay, next slide. Our next is our career development, and we're working with Dr. Whittington, who is also in the dean's level, but also within our department working on career development. It's career development across all the different groups. So obviously staff, our faculty, and our learners, because our goal is to train leaders in anesthesia, right? So you can lead in many different ways. We'd love you to stay on as faculty. We'd also love for you to go out into the community and care for the diverse communities that serve in the Los Angeles and in the United States. You can see the working group members there. The next slide. And we have the education working group. And so there's some particular parts of education. When you think of it, I'm sure you're thinking, oh, education in my residency, what I'm going to learn. That is true. But in more than that, we want to expand our education of Jedi principles to our faculty, our staff, and our nurse anesthetists, our residents, and our fellows. Now, many of you have already in your medical school and prior to going to medical school, a lot of education on these Jedi principles. And so we want to make sure that we're educating our faculty and continuing to educate you on these principles as we move forward and care for our diverse patient population. So you can see some of the areas that we're focused on, and we'll talk about the particulars in a moment about what we're going to be doing for your education within health equity. Next slide. And our research working group. So there is an abundance of health disparities research going on across different specialties, and we want to work within and collaboration with these other groups. And of course, anesthesia, I'm sure one of the reasons that you love this specialty so much is that you interface with so many different groups. And so we have a chance to work in these spaces. And so we would love to be part of, and we have faculty and residents that have already focused their interest in research in health disparities. And so we're going to work with the members of our department to really build this out even more. So you can see the members of the working group there, and we'll go to the next slide. So how does this work? So we have monthly meetings with all the Jedi leads. And in our department, we're fortunate to have a Jedi staff lead and a Jedi faculty lead. And so we go to those monthly meetings with all of the other departments and discuss the things that we're working on. And we have within the department quarterly meetings. There is resident involvement, and we really love to have resident involvement on the committees because your perspective is really important. And then we do general updates for the meeting and working group spotlight presentations. Beyond the quarterly meetings, each of the working groups are, their task is to meet within the small working groups and working on the projects that they've outlined in the action items, and then they present at these quarterly meetings. And then we obviously continue to grow with our monthly meetings across the different disciplines. We develop and have collaborations with the different groups as we meet on the monthly basis. Next slide. So the health equity curriculum, this is something that we are developing. You can see the timeline there. So you as a resident will already have this underway, this curriculum, and it's being head up by Dr. Asnaki. She was, we recruited her from UCSF, where she had developed this with along colleagues there at UCSF. And you can see it was both within the surgery and anesthesia. They created this curriculum. And Dr. Asnaki has come here and brought this curriculum, and we're building out and growing it as well. And so you can see there the timeline that we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about global health equity and social determinants of health. If you are not familiar with DGSOM's global health program, it's one of the probably best in the country, if not the best in what they do, and is really highly sought after for students who want to do global health pathways. So we're building upon that within the anesthesia department. And so we have this global health equity and social determinants of health module, the cultural humility and structural competence. And of course, we can't talk about health equity without talking about structural racism and anti-racism, and the safety net systems and anesthesia care in resource-constrained settings. So you can see the outline of how we're going to be doing that with the different classes. And so that's something that is going to be introduced this year with our current resident class. Next slide. The other thing I want to just show you a snapshot. So we have built out our staff lead in the Jedi space is Olivia Vallejo, and she built out this internet resource. So this is available, and this is just a snapshot for those of us that have the intranet, but we wanted to give you a chance to kind of look at it, an inside look at what we have here as a resource. And so the links that you can see there are links that are for across the campus within the health system and the DGSOM. And then we have the members of the anesthesia committee, and we have our schedule. And then we are doing our Jedi book club, which is a phenomenal program that we rolled out last year. It coincides with the School of Medicine's book club. And so we have that ability to have crosstalk between the students that are reading the book along with our faculty, our residents, and our staff. And so the book club, last year we had CAST, and this year we have Heather McGee's The Sum of Us. And so we've already started our first session with the book club, and it goes throughout the year. And the residents are provided a copy of the book for the book club. That is, the department provides that for you. Next slide. The other thing we wanted to have, and we have on the internet, but this is actually available and is part of our transparency across DGSOM and the UC Workforce Diversity. You can actually look at this dashboard. There's two different dashboards to look at, what is the profile of our faculty, our staff within DGSOM, and that's a really important thing within different specialties, within different categories, race, ethnicity, gender, what they're, whether they're staff, whether they're faculty. So you can access that on our DGSOM website, but we also have that within our internet resource. All right, the next slide, I think this is my last part. So I thank you all for the time. And if you have any questions on the Jedi work and what we're doing within the department, please feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to chat with you. All right, I'm going to turn it over to our, I assume, chief residents.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm John. This is Marita, although she's kind of blurred out in the screen.
You guys can probably remove the background.
We're emerging from the fog. Did we remove it? How do we do it? Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone.
Karen should be able to help you with that.
Yeah.
You can go to preferences on the Zoom.
Instead, it's Dr. Buckley himself who knows how to fix this problem. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Buckley. All right, everyone. Hi, guys. I'm John. This is Marita. That's Peter. We are 3 of the 4 chief residents this year. Our colleague, Dr. Rahimian, had a conflicting appointments, but she shares our excitement that you guys are all on this Zoom. We're pretty overwhelmed with the engagement and the number of students that are interested in learning more about our program. I think we each wanted to just kind of quickly talk to you. We can go to the next slide about why we love training here at UCLA. You've heard from our excellent program and department leadership. So I'll start, and I would say, you know, I'm looking out in this room at all these attendings that you learned from, some of our you know, most accomplished attendings, most senior attendings in the department. And every single one of them, with the exception of Dr. Whittington, because he's new to our department, but every single one of them I've taken call shifts with. I've been on the front lines with them. I've learned from them in the OR, you know, out of the OR for certain. Most memorably and most recently, I was on call on 4th of July with Dr. Cannison, and we took care of patients all day and all night. We snuck up to the roof, watched some fireworks with the rest of the call team. We got kicked off of the roof and had to go back to the ORs. It was a blast. And, you know, so I like to think of UCLA, it has all the advantages and all the opportunities of like a big ivory tower academic place, but it's approachable. All the attendings in the department and especially in this room are, you know, so accomplished, but also incredibly approachable. So you're not going to have that stuffiness, that intimidating nature, but you're also going to benefit from a place that has all the resources and all these great people that you can learn from and develop your career while you're here.
And I'm Marita. So for myself, I think one of the big things that I was looking for in a residency program was a program that would set me up for whatever I wanted to do after residency. And I wasn't entirely sure, but I knew I wanted to go somewhere that would provide me with all of the resources to go into academics, to do a fellowship, to get a, you know, a good community practice job if that's what I wanted. And I felt like UCLA kind of had all of the resources to give me each of those things once I decided what I had wanted. And I'm actually staying here for cardiac fellowship. And so I can say that one of the reasons I decided to stay here for fellowship is exactly kind of what John had said. And that's all of the people here, and the thought of going somewhere else and missing all of the people and how well this hospital works was too much. So I'm really excited to stay here for fellowship. And I think the fact that I decided to stay here is a testament to this institution and particularly our department.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Peter. Like Marita, I definitely was interested in finding a program that would set me up for whatever my career goals would be after residency, because I didn't know at the time. But I would say what really drew me to UCLA was the culture and the people that I picked up on during my interactions and my interviews here. I'm originally from the South, but then I did medical school up in the Northeast, and I was kind of applying all over. And so having noticed the cultural changes from the South to the East Coast, it was kind of easy to pick up on how not all academic environments are made equal. And having an appropriate cultural match for me was very important. And I found at UCLA that we are a group of very well-balanced physicians who prioritize clinical care and being exceptional doctors, but also being good humans as well, who have things beyond just our career goals in mind. And that was important to me because no matter what, I knew I didn't want to lose my humanity as part of the training process. So that's going to be less easy than I had doing virtual interviews. So I encourage you guys to take the opportunity like tonight to ask questions that you think will help you figure out if this will be a good match for you guys. And yeah.
Yeah, and we'd be remiss to say, you know, we have this great culture and this great training program, but we also do it in an awesome city to live and work in. And, you know, the weather's great all the time. So you'll get a chance to speak with our residents in the breakout rooms a little bit more about resident life in and out of the hospital. But we will now have some opportunity for you guys. There was a lot of information covered to ask some questions, get that answered by anyone that spoke earlier. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Buckley now.
So to kind of give you the timeline, we're going to do this for about 20 minutes, and then around 5:20, we're going to take about a 10-minute break. And the main purpose of that 10-minute break is to give a chance for our wonderful education office staff to put you guys all in breakout rooms, which will take probably about 10 minutes. So don't worry if it takes a little while, we'll get it all set up. And in the interest of time, what I did was when you registered, you all had the opportunity to ask us questions. So I went through all the questions you asked, and I tried to pick out questions that were kind of like a reoccurring theme. And then I'm going to try to just kind of run through them right now, which will probably take us through our entire amount of time. So we won't use the chat function, but later on, as you heard, you'll be able to meet with our residents. There'll be no faculty involved in those breakout rooms, so ask them anything you want. You know, because I think our residents are actually one of our greatest strengths, and I think giving you an opportunity to talk to them in private and ask them any questions you can think of, I think will actually help us in the long run. So kind of the most common question I get asked, and it was in the chat numerous times, was how has the residency program changed in the last few years, or how have the residents brought up concerns and have the residents been able to institute change? And I'm going to give you a couple of simple examples, but our most common process, as was mentioned earlier by Dr. Mayabui, is we have the Education Steering Committee, and that has the different class representatives. But what I think is very special about it is the number of vice chairs that actually participate. So Dr. Kennison is the chair, is frequently there. And then this meeting that we had on Wednesday, I think we had 5 of our vice chairs, including our executive vice chair. And it's really important having that level of leadership there, because those are the people that have the power to actually change things in that moment. So instead of the residents telling me a good idea, then I go to Dr. Turner, and then Dr. Turner goes to Dr. Kennison. You know, by having us all together in the same meeting, Dr. Kennison can say, you know, I like that idea, let's do it. And then it immediately happens. So to give you some specific examples that came out of resident ideas, one thing that we did this year is our liver transplant rotation. We're one of the busiest liver transplant centers, but what we learned from the residents is 2 weeks is kind of a long time to be doing such big, intense cases. So the residents, you know, mentioned that. So what we did is we split the rotation up. So now you do a week of liver transplant, then you do a week of vascular surgery, then back to a week of liver transplant, and then a week of vascular surgery. Another example that came up, I was going to institute this year a month of surgery. So I talked to the current interns from last year's group, and I said, I'd like to give you guys a month of surgery experience. What do you think? And they said, that's great, but what about head and neck surgery? And I'd tell you the truth, I'd never thought of that idea. I was like, that's a great idea, because I'm actually the director of the head and neck team, and I love our head and neck surgeons. And the thought was, by working with the head and neck surgeons, you're going to do a lot of airway, you know, surgical airways, you know, a lot of different scopes, just kind of a better understanding. It's really applicable to our field. Because what I found is almost all the great ideas that I've ever had came from a resident. It's never myself. It's true. And then the last, sorry, that's Dr. Turner last in the back. The last change, this is actually something that we talked about this week to kind of give you a current update, is one of our class representatives asked, you know, is it possible to get certified in ATLS? So that's kind of like ACLS, but for trauma life support. So we brought in one of our critical care faculty who's an expert in trauma care, and we spent some time talking about actually developing a trauma curriculum. And that's one of the things I talked to Dr. Kennison about this week. And you know, based on that resident feedback, that's something we're planning on doing for both the faculty in the grand rounds and also in the resident curriculum. So another question I saw was, how does the resident scheduling happen? And do the residents get to put in any feedback for what cases they do? And as I mentioned at the beginning, the residents are assigned every day first. So what they'll do is they'll make what the schedulers think are the most educational cases. They'll assign all the residents. And then once they run out of residents, they'll fill in the gaps with the CRNAs, the staff physicians, and the faculty that are working solo. But to give the residents a little bit of feedback, for about the last year, the CA3 that's on what we call A-call has been allowed to pick the room that they do. And then one of the things we talked about this week is expanding that to the CA2 that's on first call will also be able to select their cases. So 2 residents each day will get to pick the room that they're in. Just kind of giving residents an opportunity to have a little bit of control over their education. You know, obviously we can't let every resident pick their room because you wouldn't be able to make a schedule that way, but we've expanded it to 2, and maybe as time goes on, we may even expand it further. Another question that I saw is, how are the CRNAs used for scheduling? So kind of like I mentioned, they exclusively get scheduled after the residence. So you'll never compete with CRNAs for cases. And I think that's very important because I think you never want to have a competition. You know, your education is our first priority. Like what, for example, when I'm a faculty working solo, I don't need an education. So they'll put me in maybe some of the rooms that are a little bit longer, a little bit less intensive. And it's the same thing with our CRNAs. Like we use them exclusively to cover the cases that we'd rather not have residents cover. And I mentioned kind of earlier, there's a question about like how the fellows are used. Please ask our residents and confirm what I said is true, but you'll never have any competition with fellows. And you know, ask the residents, but what I hear is the residents actually really like working with the fellows because it's just another person to kind of give them knowledge. A lot of times I found the residents actually like asking the fellows what they think are the more basic questions. You know, Dr. Mayabui is one of our liver transplant faculty and she's really nice, but you can imagine like the resident doing their first liver transplant may not want to ask her, you know, what is this reperfusion thing? So they'll find the fellow to ask. So this is another question I saw that was, you know, how does the intern year look? Like, is the intern year kind of like a medicine prelim year? Is it more like a transitional year? And I'm going to say it's kind of like more similar to a transitional program than an internal medicine prelim year, even though it's run by our internal medicine program. So to give you a rough breakdown, you'll do 1 month with the head and neck team, head and neck surgeons. You'll do a month of ED. You'll do about 2 months in the ICU. You'll do about 3 months in the medicine floors. You'll do a month of anesthesia, and then you'll do 3 or 4 months of subspecialties, consults, and those kind of things. Another question that I saw in the chat or in the questions from you guys, give us an example of how a program director has managed an emergency that's come up by a resident. Part of the reason I have Dr. Mayabui with me is one of the two of us is virtually always here. And we kind of work together on everything. So in other words, if I'm not here today, someone would simply go to Dr. Mayabui and tell about an issue. And this is something that comes up somewhat often. And you'll give you a kind of example. Not too long ago, a resident paged me and said, you know, do you have a chance to chat? And we touched base with them. And the resident just kind of reported that they'd had some things going on with their personal life. And it's just been a little bit of a rough go. And my immediate response is, let's get you some time, get you out of the OR, and have you go to our behavioral wellness center. So our behavioral wellness center is a center that's funded by the hospital system, and it consists of psychiatrists, psychologists, and various other health professionals. And I refer residents there on a somewhat regular basis. And the nice thing about it is I called the center, made sure the resident got an appointment, but then once the resident goes there, I don't hear anything. And what I reported to the resident was, your job is just to tell me what you need. You know, I don't need to know a diagnosis. I don't need to know how they're helping you. I don't even need to know who you're seeing. You just need to report to me that you need to see someone at 4 p.m. on a Thursday. And then I'll make sure that you get relieved and get, you know, whatever, you know, support you need. And on a given year, we probably send 8 or 10 residents there, which seems like a lot. But I think it's just a really important resource because, you know, everyone's going to have challenges in their life. And my job is just to make sure that we give you the support and the resources you need so that you can get help. Because I think if we give you that support, you're ultimately going to do a better job in your training, but also take better care of your patients. And it's kind of the same lines along doctor's appointments, because people have kind of asked that question, like, how do we deal with doctor's appointments? You know, there was a time when myself, Dr. Mayabui, Dr. Turner, when we were residents, the way you did doctor's appointments is you went post-call. The idea of asking your program to get you out to go to a doctor's appointment seemed crazy. And it worked, but it wasn't a good system. And as Dr. Turner mentioned earlier, we have a member of our education office staff whose sole job is to help us with scheduling issues. And I get the emails every week, and now we have about pretty much 5 to 10 residents a week that we help schedule doctor's appointments. And what we've done is we actually have a system where Tuesday afternoons, they know that if they schedule an appointment and pretty much anytime after 1 p.m., they can go without fail. And the same thing on Wednesdays. And it doesn't mean that those are the only days they can go to doctor's appointments, but they know that those are very easy days so that they can kind of schedule it. And then once they have the appointment, they just let us know and we make sure they go. But I think it's important that we have a system that allows residents to actually get out of clinical work and do things to take care of themselves. with the question related to how do residents get formal feedback, it's in a variety of mechanisms. So for example, Dr. Mayabui works with you today. At the end of the day, a lot of times she'll sit down with you and say, let's just talk about what went well today, what kind of things you want to work on. It gives you a little bit of feedback in that fashion. You'll also be assigned a clinical competency mentor. So every resident gets a formal mentor, and each mentor has about 8 to 10 residents. And they'll meet with you on a quarterly basis. And I think that's really important because one of the challenges of anesthesia is you never really get to compare yourself to your peers. So when you're an internal medicine resident and you're presenting your patients to the senior resident and you struggle a little bit, you at least know you're doing okay because the next resident struggled as much as you did. And that makes you feel better. The problem in anesthesia is you're rarely going to work with a co-resident. So when you're having the typical struggles that everyone has, you don't see anyone else struggling next to you. So I like having the CCC mentors available just to kind of talk to you and kind of go through your evaluations and just kind of help you understand that you're on track to where you need to be. And we have an exceptionally good track record of residents moving through our program and successfully completing the program. Close to, over the course of the last 10 years, we've only had a single resident leave the program because they just weren't, going to kind of work their way through in a successful fashion. So, we've had residents have various struggles like every program does, but we have a very good system of kind of get people back on track and successfully graduating, because I think that's important. You've spent a lot of time getting to today, and it's our job as a program to support you and make sure that you successfully complete the program and move on to the next step. Another question I saw was how many residents go into fellowship and what percentage do fellowship versus go into a job? And it's about 50%. And I think that's a happy medium. You'll go to some programs where close to 100% of residents will do fellowships, and I'm sure the program will say that's a great benefit. I'm going to argue otherwise because I think about half is right. Because if you think about it, you can't get 100% of people to agree on anything. So if everyone's doing a fellowship, you kind of have to wonder why. Because maybe they don't feel ready to practice. They literally don't feel like maybe they're just not ready to go out on their own. Or maybe, the residents are worried they can't get a job. Our residents have zero trouble getting jobs. We already have numerous CA3s who have gotten jobs. And I've actually been talking to a couple that they got a job offer and now they just got another offer from a place they didn't even think about. And now they're struggling. Like, what do they do? They've, too many good jobs to think about. And actually, I've actually found that sometimes it influences the percentage of our residents doing fellowships because a lot of residents will be really excited about doing a fellowship, and then they'll see the jobs that the class above them got, and then they'll start thinking, do I really want to do that fellowship? So what I tell the residents is you should do a fellowship because you want to be a specialist. So Dr. Mayabui, she's a specialist in liver transplant anesthesiology. So, that would be something you do a fellowship in. If you want to be a cardiac anesthesiologist, you should do cardiac anesthesia. You want to take care of little babies, then that's the reason to do the fellowship. But on the other hand, at UCLA, you don't do a fellowship to get a good job. You don't do a fellowship to be an amazing anesthesiologist. We will take care of both those things. You should do a fellowship specifically because you want to be a specialist. And when you look at our list of where residents have done fellowships, it's a pretty amazing list. The next question was, how do the interns transition from being an intern to CA1? I think that's one of the advantages of being at a program that actually has a combined internship with the CA1 year, or your combined internship with the program. Because what we do is you spend a month with us doing anesthesia sometime between March and June. And then what we do is we pair you up with another intern. I call it your buddy. If you ask any resident or even faculty that trained with us, everyone remembers their buddy. My buddy was in 2006 and I remember him well. I also remember who my one-to-one faculty was. But what we do is you and your buddy will be with the same faculty for the first 2 weeks. And the reason we pair you up with a buddy is it's an incredible amount to learn. And a lot of times it's nice to have your buddy because you can go, how do we turn on the anesthesia machine? Or how do you do the fluid warmer? And I select the faculty that actually do the one-to-one training, and I make sure I pick faculty that are, good trainers, but actually people that are very nice and friendly because it's a lot to learn. but I understand it's stressful. So by giving you a buddy, you have someone to kind of work with and ask all those what you think are silly questions. We also have an intensive didactic program. So every day around 1 o'clock, we'll get you out of the OR for 1 to 2 hours, and we'll run through, various basic topics just to kind of get you ready. And then when July comes around, we'll kind of do a little bit more of that to kind of transition you to being a CA1. But we've had this process in place for at least 15 or 20 years, and I think it really kind of gets everyone up and running by July, which kind of brings us to the next question, which was related, how quickly do CA1s gain independence to do their own cases? And I don't have an answer for that because it depends. And, ask the residents this question, but if you're a CA1 and you're doing a healthy 20-year-old having, toe surgery, you can be relatively independent by August. But we don't have a lot of healthy 20-year-olds having toe surgery by our residents. Those would be the cases done by the CRNAs or by the solo faculty. So if you're doing a liver transplant with Dr. Mayabui, you're probably not going to be solo even early CA3. But we do kind of have a transition, and there will be quick independence with a lot of supervision, I think is the best way to describe it. So like even early CA1 year, there'll be a good amount of time that you'll be alone in the OR, but then Dr. Mayabui will be like a minute away, and she'll have a sense that something's wrong, and she'll kind of appear before you even have a chance to call her. So it's like, independence, but a lot of support. The other question is, how early do residents get exposure to subspecialties? And I think that's one of the unique things about our program, because the CA1s will do acute pain. A lot of the CA1s will do neuro. They start doing neuro in October. When the residents go to the VA and do a month of the multi-specialty OR, they'll actually do thoracic. They'll do cardiac cases. When you go to all of you as a CA1, you'll actually do thoracic, you'll do major vascular. And we have so much peds. I did my first peds case in August of my CA1 year. And I think that's a really nice thing about our program. Many of our peer programs don't really have an abundance of peds. So a lot of times you have to wait to do peds until you go to a children's hospital. Our CA3s, if they have ever given me a complaint, many CA3s have said, I'd wish to do less pediatric hearts because they're really complicated. And maybe a little bit less peds as a CA3. But I like that problem. Like I'd rather have residents saying I would like to do less, congenital hearts than saying, hey, sometime in my residency, I'd love to see one, pediatric heart. So I think it's a good problem to have. The next question I saw, and we're gonna be done in about 2 minutes. Does the work follow residents home? And I think it depends on what you mean by that. I want to emphasize, we're not, Starbucks baristas. When our shift ends, everything doesn't end. So when you go home, you are going to read about your case for the next day. You're going to look up your patient, make sure you understand the patient's issues. I am going to ask that at some point during that week, you're going to read anesthesia. And I'd like to think that any anesthesia program in the country is going to make that request, because we want you to gain this training and learn, and the only way to do that is to actually do some reading. And you will meet at some point in the night, and residents will page me, and I'll spend 5 to 15 minutes talking to the resident and just kind of preparing for the next day, kind of telling them what to expect, and spending a little time just kind of going through things. So you will do those types of things. But other than that, you're not going to be getting paged at night. Fortunately, we're not like surgeons or internal medicine doctors that get paged by nurses to do follow-up care. But I do want the residents preparing for the next day. And maybe just looking if there's one more. So maybe I'll end with, are there international rotations as a CA3? And I will admit, COVID really did throw a major wrench in it. We had a very robust international electives before COVID hit. We had a month-long rotation in China. We had various other international electives. And for a couple of years, that all had to stop. But I'm happy to report that 2 of our residents, and I think at least one of them is on our breakout rooms. I see his name, Sergey is there. He's going to be going on an international elective in October. And some of our faculty are actually in the process of creating multiple new electives. So I think in the coming year, the amount of electives is going to go up dramatically. This is something that's strongly supported by Dr. Turner, myself, Dr. Cannison. I think this is both an important part of your training and a service that we can actually provide others. So my expectation is that it'll significantly increase in the coming years. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to go through as many questions as I wanted because time unfortunately always flies by. But I tried to go through some of these things quickly. And like I said, you'll have about an hour, I think, with our residents, and feel free to ask them any questions I didn't address. And I actually gave the residents some of the questions that you guys asked because some of the questions I thought were actually more pertinent to them. So I intentionally didn't address all the questions that I saw. So that's about it. Lucy or Irelia, what would you like to give them any instructions for the breakout?
Yes, so we are currently working on arranging the breakout rooms. You could give us 5 minutes. We'll give you instructions shortly. So Dr. Buckley, you could have 5 more minutes to answer questions if you would like while we figure out last minute logistics.
Can I just follow up?
Dr. Turner would like to add in something. So I'm going to just spin to Dr. Turner.
Hi. Hi, you guys. I just wanted to dovetail off of something that Dr. Buckley just talked about. The program has evolved over many years, and a lot of the people at this table either trained here or have been here for a long time to see how it's evolved. But the growth in the program, the growth in the size of the department has been significant, but we've managed to maintain the nature of the core training program, which I think is really important. One thing with regards to like CRNAs, when I started, there were, and when Christine Mayo and I started right around the same time, I think there was like maybe 5 CRNAs or something. Yeah, and now there's like 50 something. And so like Dr. Buckley said, typically we use them to relieve you at the end of the day. It's pretty rare for you to ever relieve a CRNA when you're not on call. The vast majority of time, if you're on call, if you relieve somebody, it could be a CRNA, it could be another resident. That being said, you might not be relieved by a CRNA at 3 o'clock. We have CRNAs who start becoming available around then, but I just want to kind of point out that we have a code triage. So. Oh, now it's canceled. Good. Anyway, so I just want to kind of point out that, we start trying to get people out at around 3, as CRNAs get freed up from other assignments, or as call residents get freed up. And we have some residents that work like an evening shift. So when they come at 3, they'll start getting people out. We prioritize people who are pre-call to get out first. And this is something that Dr. Buckley works with the representatives from the Education Steering Committee, because every once in a while, the residents decide they want to change the order. Like, years ago, the liver transplant resident who was on call didn't have high priority, but now they have higher priority based on the residents' feedback about that. So sometime in that time period, you'll be relieved, ideally. But like Dr. Buckley said, we're not baristas. We don't work a shift. And so, we will get out when we get out. And some days are longer than others. We do have reading hours, which Dr. Buckley will talk a little bit more about that. But long story short, we try to prioritize the educational part of the day in the OR for you as much as we can, and make sure that you have time at the end of the day to go home, read, prepare for the next day. But the thing I really wanted to emphasize is we do expect you to pre-op and talk to your attending for the next day. I know there are many programs that this is how you pre-op. You text somebody and you say, this is what we're doing tomorrow. That is not this program. We expect you to be prepared to talk about the patient and to know your patient pretty well. And your faculty members, are going to have varying degrees. Some are going to spend 5 and 10 minutes. Some are going to spend a half an hour. And some of them, they use that as their time to teach, specific topics. So that's going to vary a little bit too. So the end of the day is a little bit variable. I don't want you to think it's like a magic thing that we have like people just sitting there doing nothing and everybody leaves at the same time at the end of the day. But we do have a pretty good system and we do keep track. That's all I want to say.
I think there was a question about the research letter of intent.
Go ahead.
I can quickly answer that. So I think there was a question in the chat about the letter of intent to apply for the scholars program. Who should that be directed to, you can direct that to Dr. Buckley or to myself. It doesn't matter. You just write why you're interested in the scholars program, and then the letters of recommendation from your research mentors. I think they'll be very helpful just to know. Of course, I mean, you know who you are, your credentials, and if you have significant research background. That way, at least we know that you're interested, you're invested in a career as a research physician scientist. And if you have further questions, you can email me for sure. All the information is on our website, so I'll be happy to talk to you or email with you.
And then someone else had asked the question, do you have to do anesthesia research, or do you have to do any research? Does doing research, is it helpful? Sure. But just like other things, some people do amazing, work with different, leadership groups, or, do things in the community. I'm just looking for signs of success in some area. So whatever you do that makes you successful is a good mark. And if you do anesthesia research, great. But many people didn't enter medical school planning to be an anesthesiologist. I think if I went around this room, I certainly didn't. I don't know if Dr. Mayabui did, Dr. Umar didn't. Most of us didn't know anything about anesthesia. So most people did research other than anesthesia, and that's still very valuable. I got a couple minutes left, so maybe I'll just address, we talked a little bit about the schedule. And this is something like during the actual interview, I will present the actual data. So I have duty hours for all the rotations, all the different years. And I show it to you because I think it's good to be very upfront with what the residents actually chart. And I tell the residents to do accurate charting of their duty hours. There's no reason to lie about it. And like I said, ask the residents that later. And the duty hours work out to about 54 hours a week on average across the intern year. And then every year it gets slightly less till the CA3 year becomes 51. And I think that puts us pretty much middle of the road across most anesthesia programs. But if you ask the residents, do you guys work hard? They're going to say yes. And I think that's an important distinction. They're not working exceptionally long hours. I'm not saying 54 hours is an easy week, but I think that's pretty average. But when they're here and you're doing big challenging cases, you're going to work hard. And I think that's a good thing, because if I'm going to be stuck in the hospital, especially when I was in a residency, I wanted to do the big challenging cases, the things that were going to kind of push me to my limits. But at the same time, I do want you to eventually leave the hospital and get to do other normal life activities and have time to, take care of yourself and study and those kind of things. So that's why I think it's a happy medium of, enough hours, but not excessive. So on average, you can ask the residents this later. They, ask them when they get done. It's going to vary on rotations and different things. But if you're not on call, 3 o'clock would be a really good day. 4 or 5 is probably pretty average. 6 sometimes. But rarely after 6 o'clock, you'll be working if you're not on call. And we instituted a policy about 3 or 4 years ago. And to the best of my knowledge, we were the first training program in the country that did this. But if you're in Dr. Turner corrected me, 5 or 6 years ago, we created what we're calling reading hours. And what it is if you're not on call after 5 p.m. and you're still working, you write down the time. So if you work till 5:45, you write down 45 minutes. And then once you accumulate 8 hours of time, you can submit that time to request what we're calling a reading day. That gives you a day outside the OR that you can use to advance your education as you see fit, whether that's at your house, the beach, or somewhere else. But I like the idea of reading hours because I want to get you out in a reasonable fashion, but if I can't, I will replace the time minute for minute on another day. So it's kind of like our way of showing you that we're not trying to get every possible minute out of you, and we just simply replace it on the days we can't get you out. So I think unfortunately our time has run out. I'd be happy to talk to you guys forever, but I really want you to have time to talk to our residents.